Great. All right, so let's start with Eric, and if anybody else, just put your hands up. I'll be writing
So, Bill, I want to thank you. That was totally wonderful. You're the only philosopher I know who can make a phone book philosophically interesting. Actually,
the thing is,
really minded for philosophical lessons and evidential support. It's fantastic.
I was looking for a project that could be done in classes, and an easy database at the Yellow Pages of phone books. Of course, you can't do that now because they're all. But what they do, it turns out, if you pick up the Yellow Pages for a given city or area, you get an immediate assay of the professional configurations there in the manufacturing and so on. So,
But I do want to ask you a question about a particular issue in the talk. So you mentioned early on the generative entrenchment, how it relates, you think, to certain features of scientific theory and scientific knowledge, and I found that very compelling. But when you're talking about modularity and polyfunctionality, you didn't mention scientific theories or scientific knowledge in particular, so I wasn't sure whether you wanted to apply it to that as well.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's some, at least for scientific theories and knowledge, it seems like there's some tension there.
Yeah.
Like some really lovely work of Jim's shows that, like, for instance, in general relativity, the internal principles are so tightly the generative, well, I guess you would call the I can't say the word.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I
that
think
one, entrenched principles are so tightly connected. You really can't take them apart or change
Yeah.
just one, without having the whole thing fall apart. But but then I was thinking, well, maybe you can apply this idea of modularity and polyfunctionality to more high-level ideas, like everything is a simple harmonic oscillator. You just reuse that equation just all over the place, and you reuse perturbative expansion techniques just all over the place. So I'm wondering, first of all, is that the kind of thing you may have in mind if you do want to apply it to scientific theories? And second of all, I mean, it seems like if these two ideas do apply to scientific theories and scientific knowledge, they apply kind of in very different ways at very different levels.
No, I think that's definitely right, and it clearly is co-adaptation of a scientific theory as it gets developed. The various elements, for one thing, have to, as it were, be transformed in a way that they can talk to one another. Adaptations has to be reconfigured to relate to genetics if you're going to do population genetics and so on. Now, the only thing I can think of from classical cases is the fifth postulate, in which at a certain stage you varied that to generate non-Euclidean geometries. My bet is people can find other things, and in evolutionary theory, I can find, because that's a situation in which there are so many different special cases that you end up having the broad framework of the theory and individual principles. For example, mode of reproduction, is it sexual or asexual, or any two can play, which happens in fungi. There are 6 mating types.
That's the fun in fungi.
Yeah, right. Oh, wow, okay. So it definitely does happen. And of course, for me, one of the prime examples is code, programming languages and object-oriented programming and things like that. So does that?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
I think I'd like to look at Michel Janssen's stuff in more detail, or get him to look at it in more detail and see. He and I have sat down and pulled out about 7 problem-solving strategies that are exemplified in his cases, give reason to believe that it's not just accident.
Here we have a finger.
So it's just a comment, so maybe that actually you could talk about this more at a framework level than at a theory level. So you think about like Hamiltonian dynamics, that you have like the modularity would be choosing the potential, the kinetic and the potential term. So you have that kind of like in these mechanical frameworks, this ability to choose how you're tailoring the potential, but you've got a generic toolkit for turning this into a dynamic. So I think that would be the nice.
And that's what makes it so powerful.
Exactly.
Yeah. In what's his name? The Emergence of Mathematical Physics, the history, Masters of Theory.
Genia, Andrew Genia.
Yeah, right. You have a great deal of that.
Sorry.
It begins with a W.
Yeah, Warwick.
Andrew Warwick.
Sorry.
Yeah, right.
He's an Andrew anyway.
Right, okay.
Tom?
Yeah, so this is
I guess more or less the same question again. Well, I was thinking about Michel Janssen's case studies, and I'm not sure if he included this. Eric mentioned it, perturbation theory, that he looked at the retention of through the transition from classical to quantum mechanics and worked with student Charles Midwinter. So that seems like, if you're looking at sort of different kinds of transformation of modules of scientific theory, that's a part that just sort of seems to fit in without much adjustment at all. But most of, and I'm not sure what's on that list, but I think most of Michel's examples, involve some really significant structural changes where, the role of the scaffolding is to sort of...
It's thrown away after.
Yeah, and it's
right.
thrown away. So there I sort of find it a little harder to see the role of modularity. I mean, could you say something more about how through these sort of transformative processes modularity plays a role?
Yeah, I don't want to say modularity is present everywhere.
Yes.
But I want to say when you got it, it's a very powerful adaptation. What's more striking in Michel's cases is entrenchment and conservation. That is, you have to get these various limiting results in the new thing, or you use tools, mathematical tools and others developed for an earlier theory and a newer one. And something I've only looked at it at a distance, but consider the gravitational potential, and then the electrostatic potential, and then Gibbs' chemical potential, and then Sewell Wright's fitness. And then in 1922, you have a book by Kellogg called Potential Theory. And in fact, you've got the emergence of vector calculus becoming entrenched through these different applications. So that's an example of entrenchment, of modularity.
That has a very complex history, by the way.
I'll bet.
The potential function existed unnamed, starting with Lagrange trying to get the secular acceleration of the moon off of the spheroidal shape of the Earth.
Huh.
And then Laplace and others, who's the multiplier, anyway, a series of papers all focused only on the shape of the Earth and what we would now call the gravitational potential. Then in 1828, Green wrote a masterpiece of a paper taking that work, which had culminated in some for Poisson on gravitation, and applying it for the first time to electromagnetism, where for the first time mass centers. And then he introduced the phrase potential and potential function in that. He said, I'm now coining this. And then after Green, of course, he provided all the mathematics we all learned when we take partial differential equations, and it exploded.
That's Green's theorem.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Neat. Do it.
Someone
Topic
else's
for a
graduate
dissertation
student do it.
student.
Quick follow-up on that. So it wasn't clear to me whether this transient disposability character of scaffolding was part of the conception of scaffolding that you were talking about?
We have a volume of stuff on scaffolding and evolution, culture, and cognition. Jim Griesmer and Linda Capariello and I. And we're at some difference with this. Put it this way, there's an awful lot of scaffolding that becomes internalized. The Baldwin effect involves an effect. So genetic assimilation of phenotypic adaptation, the importing thing. Piaget thought that conservation and cognitive development work that way. But things can become externalized too. You can offload things that were originally internal to things. So we no longer synthesize vitamin C, but we eat oranges. So we make sure they're produced.
We also used to have fur, similar sort of thing. Right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
This young gentleman.
Oh, hi. So I have a question about what I take as just one of the basic starting points for projects like these. I just don't know enough. So it seems like in the history of science, there are rich examples where the application of design principles informs the development of scientific theories. So I guess I'm wondering what, so maybe there are two ways of asking this. So first, what it is that justifies us in the application of these principles from engineering or basic design principles to biological systems, or put a different way.
Or the reverse.
Or the reverse,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
I guess that's a third aspect.
Yeah.
So if we don't need any justification outside of just it works, right, and it is fruitful, why does it work?
Well, look, in one case, in arguing that generative entrenchment is generic, that is, any differentiated system will have differential entrenchment, and secondly, that increasing entrenchment emerges from complete symmetry by symmetry-breaking transformations. I think I've given that kind of general argument. I think similar things, though not as pretty, apply for robustness and modularity. What modularity does is systematize the production of variations in a way you get an enormous explosion of adaptive variance possible by recombining things. So that's the sort of thing in which, look, it's like the argument Herbert Simon gave in his paper, The Architecture of Complexity. He says, look, things are going to be hierarchically arranged through the aggregation of stable subassemblies. Why? Because it's faster. It's more probable that you'll get a solution that way. And I guess the answer is those who get there first get to eat those who come later. It's
Not sure I want to.
right, exactly. So, so the point is, in many cases, it's a kind of differential selection kind of argument embedded at a meta level for arguing why it should be so common. Is it? Yeah.
Okay, I have one. So you've shown us a lot of very interesting principles that really have adaptive value within adaptive systems. And I'm wondering, to what extent can you take this sort of catalog that you've given us, make it something rigorous, make claims of universality or quasi-universality rigorous, and then make them measurable? How much do you think can be done to make this?
That's a good question for a big research program. I mean, the level of rigor I'm satisfied with is the argument I gave over symmetry breaking in differential generative entrenchment.
How's the argument go, Cameron?
The argument goes that one, if you just look at any interesting mechanism, it's going to have differentiated parts. And if you've got differentiated parts, has a very deep empirical regularity, they're going to break under different conditions and have different consequences. That's part of what it means by being differentiated. But then starting from the symmetric case, if you had something with all parts with identical entrenchment or identical parts, and you have this system that somehow is aggregated together, so there has to be something to hold it together, and then you ask, well, local environmental conditions, or such as the inside or outside of a ball of cells, or local mutations acting on some of them and not others, will generate, say, modifier loci, which will then generate differential generative entrenchment. But as soon as you have that, then you have a different expected mean lifetime because it's lost due to mutation because it's selected for. And that's a symmetry breaking argument.
Mm-hmm. So that's the level of rigor that you're happy with?
Well, if somebody wants to pretty it up more than that, but if they don't want to do that, then give me a counterexample.
This isn't a counterexample, but it was you were sitting next to me at the PSA meeting, the last one in Chicago, when the biologists were talking about finally starting to be able to use measurement.
Yeah.
And they were in that case looking at evolutionary trajectories.
Yeah.
And you had the famous biologist from Harvard, and then you had that kid, young fellow, giving and actually introducing a way of actually measuring the difference from the optimality. Remember that? You were sitting right next to me, and the young kid.
Which PSA was this?
In Chicago.
Just
2014.
2014.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it was that session on measurement in biology. And the young fellow was saying, I think this is important.
Yeah.
And the big star said, it sure is. And that would be a case of starting to
That's the
get
level of
actual
rigor.
measurement.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
wait a minute, but it's getting measurement in there. I mean,
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, and I'm sorry, I didn't actually address that. But,
Okay.
you know, you can measure additivity or non-additivity and some other aspects of this. Yeah, anyways, I agree.
Anyone else? Okay, well then let's thank Bill
All
Wimsatt.
right, thank you.
If I could finish.